so many Americans at a time when Camus was kind of on the bad list in France for his position on the Algerian War. People like, the Black Panthers were reading him, and the people at Columbia and SDS were reading him. He was a real hero to the American left and to liberals alike. Americans they weren't involved in those political struggles that the French were involved in, and they could still see him as the writer of the resistance,
Yes.
Yeah, so he works for right now. At least The Stranger works for right now as a book about othering, how you relegate somebody to a status of almost inhumanity. You don't give them a name, you don't give them words, and then you're able to eradicate them because they're the other. For Camus, what was interesting about Meursault was that he didn't go along with the conventions of society. Camus was not thinking of it in terms of the politics of decolonization or anything like that. He wanted to depict a man who didn't fit in and who was condemned to death not for shooting and killing an Arab, but for not crying at his mother's funeral. Now, in a way, that was Camus' political statement, because he was saying, here's this court of law, an Arab has been murdered, and the fact of that murder doesn't figure at all in the trial. What figures is that this guy won't play the game of conventional French society. At the end of the book is the fact he's going to die. He says he has this big fight with the priest, and he tells him to get lost, and he has this big outpouring of emotion. This guy who hasn't had any emotions throughout the whole book. And then suddenly he understands his mother. There's this feeling of love for his mother. And he realizes now that his life is about to end, he wishes he had it all to begin with. And that's a very Camus moment. It's the opposite of nihilism. It's the realization that your life is finite. And because of that, you have to be willing to seek happiness in the here and now. I like to show students the book that inspired Camus, which was a book closely linked to Washington College. James M. Cain, The Postman Always Rings Twice. That was the book that Camus read when he had writer's block. And he had put his first manuscript in a drawer. He just couldn't get the voice right. He'd been working as a court reporter in Algiers, reporting on all these, little cases of violence between Europeans and Arabs. He read James M. Cain, and he saw that James M. Cain had this very flat narrative, first-person narrative, by a guy in jail about to be executed. But even more important for Camus is the fact that, I don't know if you remember The Postman Always Rings Twice. There's a couple, an adulterous couple. They're going to kill the woman's husband so they can marry. The husband is Greek, and Cain has them call him the Greek all through the book. And I am convinced that Camus read that and thought, yeah, that's the way to go. You call him the Arab, and it dehumanizes him, because he wanted to depict a racist society. Yes. So it's very interesting for students to look at that and to figure out for themselves, do they think Camus is portraying a racist society and that this is in some way a critique of that society? Or do they think he's participating in it? I mean, certainly, if you're a young Arab or a Frenchman of Arab descent reading The Stranger in a suburb of Paris today, you read that novel and you see the Arab has no name, you feel angry, I mean, how Camus, this unknown guy from the provinces, got his book read by the greatest writers in France and published during an enemy occupation with hardly any paper supplies and having to get through the Nazi censor. And the whole thing is just so fantastic, you can hardly believe it.